Dr. Polk, welcome. Dr. Shah, welcome. Dr. Johansen, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thanks, Aaron. It's good to see you. And I happen to notice that looks like a NASA t-shirt you've got on. Are you repping the colors? Outstanding. Outstanding. Well, Aaron, thanks for the invite. And I got to tell you, I'm with three spectacular physicians. Dr. Scheuring's just joining us as well. All three outstanding operational flight surgeons, but also outstanding DOs. And for the students, I imagine you've got questions, and please be no holds barred. What were the challenges we had as DOs? What were the advantages we had as DOs? We have absolute candor, at least with our flight surgeon cadre, and we will not be bashful in telling you what the pros and cons have been and what we've seen in our careers. But certainly this cadre especially has taken their careers to heights that most people don't do. And I know Ben this morning was just talking to the crew on orbit. Not very many physicians have their patients flying at 17,500 miles an hour around the Earth, much less planning how they'll do missions and medical care on the Moon and Mars. And that's part of our daily job, believe it or not, at NASA. And so with that, I'll ask, we'll try to leave as much room for questions as possible, knowing that there might be a lot. And I'll see if the guys want to add anything to my opening remarks here, and then we'll turn it over, see what the students want to say.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Polk. I'll lead off. I just wanted to just mention that I went to Midwestern University, Arizona College of Osteopathic Medicine in Glendale, Arizona, class of 2011. So for any of you out there that got accepted to Midwestern, it's a great school to go to. I've thoroughly enjoyed my time there, and I don't think that was mentioned in my bio. So just wanted to throw that out there for any future Midwesterners that might be listening.
Outstanding. Ronak?
There's nothing against the Midwest. You've got great deep dish pizza out there, but I went to the New York College, and I have some regional bias. Certainly love being in the New York area for almost all of my career, but the drive to work at NASA and pursue the space program shifted me to Texas. I certainly feel that the opportunities, the culture surrounding osteopathic medicine has changed in 20 years. I'm a graduate of the class of 2003 of NICOM, and I certainly believe a lot of the philosophies and ideologies that were instilled or taught to us back then help build a day-to-day foundation for our work. So again, thank you for the invitation. We're very happy to be here.
And Rick?
Oh, hi, everybody. Yeah, thanks for having me on. My name is Rick Scheuring. I'm originally from Chicago, born and raised, and went to med school in Chicago and pretty much did everything my first 30 years until I actually went to Colorado to do my FP sports medicine in Denver at the osteopathic program in President Luke's, and then came back to Illinois and practiced as a small town family practice sports medicine doc for about 6.5 years until 9/11 happened. And then 9/11 caused some course corrections, got in the United States Army, and left private practice to pursue the aerospace medicine residency at Wright State. So after that, went to NASA in 2004. My life's never been the same. And I got an extremely supportive wife and large family, 5 kids, and I was a private pilot and loved space since I was a little kid, and want to be able to find a way to combine love of medicine with the love of space, and NASA was a perfect place to do that. So, yeah.
So probably only fitting, Aaron, that I should probably say where I went to school, and since I'm probably the oldest of this group, I was also at the founding school of osteopathic medicine, but not when it was founded. So I went to A.T. Still University, and have been at NASA, intermittently with a few career changes to leapfrog in positions throughout the last 20 years. So I really appreciate this strong cadre joining me, especially in light of their mission operations that they're working right now. But we're happy to take questions from the students.
Absolutely. Awesome. So I'm just going to jump right in. We have a question coming in from Melanie, one that we get asked quite often. And, you mentioned it a little bit earlier, Dr. Polk. So did any of you face a stigma surrounding your DO title? And if so, how did you combat it through your education and career?
I'll start off. I did not, probably because I did the bulk of my training in Northeast Ohio, and DOs had been present in Northeast Ohio for a long time. The Cleveland Clinic and others had embraced DOs for some time. So I didn't run into a stigma. There was one time when I was flying in with a patient on a helicopter as the chief of life flight, and I could tell somebody was reading my name badge, and I made sure that they knew exactly what I had done with the patient, and that we had given quality care. And they had asked me, wow, you're a DO, as though that was a surprise. But very soon after my career at the trauma center in Cleveland, there were multiple different DOs that were accepted in the emergency medicine residency, et cetera. So I may have been the first there, but I doubt that anybody who's there at Metro or at the trauma center now get that same question. So that, I think Ronak had mentioned, it's evolved over the last 30 years of my career. And so I can't tell you the last time I got a question like that, other than 25, maybe 30 years ago. Guys, anybody else?
I trained in the New York, New Jersey metro area. And so, again, the prevalence of osteopathic physicians in that area was pretty high. And so there was a good general awareness. This goes back 20 years. When I moved out of that area and came down to Texas, it was in pursuit of the aerospace medicine program. And I think all of us here and others on our team came because we were just pursuing our passion. It's really, we all have stories of, I loved space when I was a kid. I enjoyed doing this when I was 10 years old. And we all came here in search of the common purpose. And none of us ever looked at each other with, what title are you? I think it was exactly the opposite, where we were surprised to say, oh, wow, there's so many osteopathic physicians here. This is great. So to answer the question that Ms. Melanie had asked, I don't recall facing stigma around the osteopathic title. So I never felt it was a challenge, never felt it was a hindrance or an uphill battle. And as you can see, our chief health and medical officer, some of our senior flight surgeons, myself, we came to our positions through hard work. And I never faced that battle.
Yeah.
I can add that I have had to educate people throughout my career, whether it's patients or even whether it's faculty at a hospital or a training program. I recall interviewing at an allopathic residency program and had to and got the question, what is a DO? And so it was a little bit of a surprise to me, but I take each of those opportunities to just educate of what a DO is, what the differences are, how that training and that choice was the right one for me, and how that it also doesn't limit us to what kind of doctor we want to be, whether it's a primary care physician or a specialist. And that there's certain aspects of being a DO that I personally see as being an advantage in bringing an additional skill set to medicine. As Ronak explained, or Dr. Shah explained, we've all chased our passion of space and aerospace medicine, and trying to combine the medical field with this passion of space that we have. And I have not seen it as a hindrance whatsoever. I've been welcomed, and there's been no questions asked on our capability or our quality of training that we've received. And I think it really rounds out the 20 or so operational flight surgeons that we have working at the NASA Johnson Space Center. We all bring a certain expertise and strengths to the team, and I think being a DO adds to that.
I really appreciate that perspective. And, that's something we hear from truly every physician I've ever spoken with or resident we work with, that stigma really only exists within that pre-med community. And then once as physicians, you really don't encounter that. So thank you for reiterating that. Kind of along what you were saying, Dr. Johansen, about how being a DO has enhanced your practice or given you something extra. A question here. She's interested in whether or not any of you use OMT in your practice with the astronauts.
Let me have Rick start off with that one. Rick does a lot with the rehab and the strength and conditioning. Obviously, with his former Olympic athlete background and his sports medicine background, he's been key into keeping our astronauts strong and healthy and preventing injuries. So, Rick.
Yeah, thanks, JD. To some extent, I do. Certainly, my soft tissue techniques, killer fingers always comes in handy for headaches, and some of the lower extremity work. Not as much as I would like to, but using OMT on the astronauts has come in pretty handy. When I've been deployed downrange with the Army, using it on my pilots and soldiers, that's come in actually a lot more handy, because unlike being here in Houston, where I've got access to world-class physical therapists and stuff, when you're in Taji, Iraq, and it's just you, OMT works. You find your half a dozen or so techniques you really like, you get really good at them, and you will find a place to use them, and I do. The astronauts, actually, there's been a couple who've so like the sacral or cranial techniques, which aren't necessarily my area. We've had DO flight surgeons come through as Air Force flight surgeon liaisons. The last couple have been DOs, and the most recent one is very skilled in OMT. So he actually had his own patient class, or for the most part, astronauts who would come specifically to see him to get their cranial or their sacral OMT done. So it's not as well known, as well advertised, because it's just a few of us who get to do it. But it gets out there, it gets used. I've used it in Russia when we've been in quarantine. Crew members had sore hamstrings or whatever, or sore low back. I'll do soft tissue countermeasure work, yeah, and it comes in handy, and it's certainly something that my allopathic counterparts just kind of look at you with a quizzical look, like, just give them some naproxen and some muscle relaxants, they'll be fine. Like, no, we'll find that tissue texture energy change and and kind of melt that away with a little counter strain. And like, you talking a different language, dude, but like, works. So yeah.
And Aaron, I only manipulate budgets and strategy and congressionals now, so I'll ask Ronak and Ben if they've got any other inputs.
I'll add that I just for personal reasons, I went to an allopathic residency program. I did internal medicine in Phoenix, just because of location and closeness to family, etc. So because of that, my OMT techniques kind of faded over time. But I will say that it is one of my biggest regrets, that I wish it hasn't faded as much as it has, because I see the benefit of using it for all those reasons that Dr. Scheuring just mentioned with our astronaut population. In many ways, we are kind of like the team doctor for the Corps of Astronauts. For these very healthy, highly trained individuals, one of their main complaints is musculoskeletal complaints, and from either their training activities or from working out on the level of many of them on the level of elite athletes. So those techniques do come in handy, and I wish that I was more proficient in them and retain those skills. So that's one piece of advice I would put out there, is that if you find yourself really enjoying the manipulative medicine training that you'll get in medical school, don't let those skills fade. You never quite know when you'll need them.
Awesome. Fantastic. This one's strictly out of curiosity, and hopefully if I have the question, I think someone else probably does too. But truly, what is it like taking care of astronauts in space these days, and what are some of the most common complaints of astronauts? You mentioned, Dr. Johansen, the musculoskeletal piece, but can you guys speak to this one?
Sure. Most of it's minor. I mean, we don't have Andromeda strains or weird bad stuff happening, in part because the astronauts are so highly screened before they get there. They have to meet very rigid standards to be certified for space flight. So I think one thing that we all agree on is the best way to practice space medicine is very similar to how we practice military aviation medicine. You have a very good preventive screening program. Because usually when you get into an operational environment, you don't have the luxury of having a lot of stuff or training or time to be able to treat serious things. So you reduce the risk of having serious things, heart attacks, strokes, cancer, stuff like that, by doing proper screening. And we have the luxury of NASA being able to screen for most disease, so that when you get accepted as an astronaut at NASA, you're already a very, very, very low risk profile for having bad disease. Now, that doesn't mean in a 20-year career at NASA you won't develop something. Some do. But that allows us to really not have to think about, a lot of bad things. So what we see in space typically is stuff you see from the environment. Astronauts will get foreign bodies in their eyes, and we have some eye wash, and they can kind of float that out. Dirt and dust in the air float, and if you're floating, it's going to get in your eyes. As Ben said, musculoskeletal conditions is probably the number one thing we treat on the ground, but also in space, primarily because the crews are exercising a lot. They're exercising 2.5 hours a day, 6 days a week. And if any of us were in the gym 2.5 hour days, 6 days a week, we would be moaning and groaning about something strained or sore or pulled or something along those lines. So we'll take care of minor muscle aches, low back pain, some different things like that. And those are some of the things. Crews get a lot of rashes on the ISS. Is it because of the dry environment? Is it because there's other things going on up there? I don't know, but they'll get these kind of funky rashes. They respond to topical medicines and they go away. They get upper respiratory symptoms. A lot of it's because of the dryness and again, all minor stuff, but it's kind of the stuff that anyone would complain about down here on Earth. And when you're flying live animals, sometimes you'll get, more sensitivity and you'll get sneezing and stuff like that. So you treat them for different things. And again, I think because of a good prevention program, we don't get bad things. But there have been some things on the moon. We had a serious shoulder injury. And we've had a few other close calls, but we've been fortunate to not have a crew member drown in a spacesuit because of the quick reaction of his partner getting him out of that suit when we had the problem with the water in the helmet years ago, or other things. So, I mean, I think that's just kind of touching the tip of the iceberg. My colleagues can definitely share some of their experiences and just highlight. There's always something going on medically, but it's usually minor. It's something you can predict the course, and you have a pretty good handle on how best to treat it, and it does not interfere with their mission. And that's really what our job is, to make sure that a medical condition does not impact crew health or performance.
And Aaron, before Ben or Ronak join in, I'll tell you, Rick touched on it a little bit, but one of the most important pertinent negatives I think that we have is in the 60 years of human spaceflight, we've not had to come home for a medical emergency. And especially this last month in November, we celebrated 20 years on the International Space Station of continuous occupation in space. And every model, every statistic said that we should have had to have brought an astronaut home at least 3 times for a medical emergency, and we didn't have to do that once. That isn't to say that we didn't take care of things on orbit. There have been things like Dr. Scheuring mentioned. We've seen changes in vision and potential for intracranial pressure in astronauts. We've seen other things that have been challenging to maybe take care of long distance and by telemedicine. But we've been very good at anticipating those potential things that would occur. We don't leave that to chance. We have things where we do some analysis in Monte Carlo sims and others to figure out what equipment to fly. But for the last 60 years of human spaceflight, we've not had to come home, and I'll knock on wood, for an emergency. And that's a big thing when you think about how critical deorbiting from space is and how challenging the space physiology is. So Ben, Ronak, anything else to add?
Yeah, I'll add. We have a saying in aerospace medicine that we're treating a normal pathology in an abnormal environment. I'll give you two examples of things that are unique to space medicine that most people aren't aware of. And one is space motion sickness. Much like you get seasick on an ocean, when you first arrive in space, your vestibular system is confused. Those semicircular canals are trying to figure out your orientation in that environment. Your eyes are trying to determine what's up and what's down, what's left and what's right. And until the body adapts to that environment, a lot of the astronauts feel motion sickness, which we treat in normal ways, but it's a unique way for those symptoms to be provoked. Another example is fluid shifts. For those of us that are here on Earth, we're in a 1G environment. The majority of our blood and our bodily fluids are down in our lower extremities due to gravity. As soon as you arrive up into a weightless environment, all of that blood that is pulled down or has that downward pull is no longer there, and so it tends to equalize across your body. You get an upward motion of fluid up into your upper torso and into your head, which can cause some of the puffiness that you might see on any of the media events showing the astronauts, or some symptoms of sinus congestion. And the body senses that there's too much fluid, and so in the first few days on orbit, there's a diuresis. The body tends to try to eliminate some of that fluid and set a new baseline. And astronauts have to adapt to that when they arrive up into space. It's some of these normal physiological processes that are provoked in unique ways due to that weightlessness, which makes our job interesting and sometimes challenging.
And Ronak?
The question asked of taking care of astronauts in space, I think we should also address the broader question, and that is taking care of astronauts in general, and how that relates to what we have learned as DOs in school going into that. The philosophy, and I don't know the words verbatim, but I think the philosophy behind osteopathic medicine is it is a foundation of our day-to-day and providing care to our nation's astronauts. They're a very unique subset of the population. And I can tell you, I was in private practice for some years before coming to NASA, and the relationship there is markedly different than what you have here. This is much more personal. You get involved with your patients' dynamics in terms of their academics, their mission training, the families, etc. And so the idea of treating our patients via body, not just body, right, but also mind and spirit, is something we believe in strongly. Spaceflight is demanding. There's no two ways about it. As Dr. Johansen mentioned, we are putting normal physiology into a very abnormal environment, altered gravity, altered pressure, but it is not just the space flight. It is also the training. It is also the intense physical training, the academics, all that one needs to learn to master those skills, and consequently the mental impacts of doing that can be very hard. And so the challenges then spill over to family, to friends, and consequently onto you as a person. By you, I mean the astronauts. And so the NASA flight surgeon is heavily engaged in all aspects of that person's life, their personal health, those ailments, but also family and overall wellness. So in this manner, I feel like we are staying true to that philosophy of treating the body, the mind, the spirit that we have seen, that we've learned about in medical school.
I love that. I appreciate that a lot, Dr. Shah. I have another question here for our incoming physician, or from an incoming physician or medical student. What kind of opportunities are available for physicians at NASA, and how can an incoming student begin to get involved?
I'll give it to the guys to answer because we have rotations down there at Johnson. But I would say the first thing for OMS 1 and 2 is to get their foundations in medicine down. And people often ask, how do you become a great flight surgeon? The first answer is to become a great physician and then build from there. But we do have rotations for the 3rd and 4th year. But I'll turn it over. Ronak, I know you've worked closely with UTMB, same with Ben and Rick. I'll let you guys share what we do with the students, but it is pretty competitive, as you can imagine.
Yeah, thank you, JD. I have had the privilege of working with many students over the past several years, and I get cold calls, emails, random people on LinkedIn just reaching out, and the interest, I can say for a fact, has had a logarithmic growth over the past decade, and I am very happy. I'm in fact elated that I am not applying to the aerospace medicine program now, and that I was able to get in when I did 10 years ago. It just, I look at the caliber of the applications, and this is not to scare people, but it's to say that it is a growing field with serious candidates, with serious qualifications. And that makes us very happy to see that growth. And we know that NASA is not the only game in town anymore, right? There are other commercial spaceflight entities. There are other opportunities. So if you look at the trajectory of aerospace medicine, I see great things happening, 5, 10 years from now. But to answer the question directly, I think some of the simplest things that one can do is to introduce themselves to the aerospace medicine family. It is a small family. Going to the Aerospace Medical Association or ASMA conference, it is our national conference, and you go there and you just meet a lot of individuals, you express your interest, and you will start to see those faces over and over again, and you'll passively learn simply by attending the sessions at the conference. The other thing that exists out there is something called AMSRO, which is the Aerospace Medicine Student and Resident Organization. And again, to put this in comparison, when I joined AMSRO a number of years ago, 15 years ago, our officership meeting was after hours, and we sat around on some chairs, and we said, so who wants to be treasurer? I'm like, I don't know, I'll be treasurer. You want to be treasurer? Do you want to be, no, I'll be president. That's how it was. And you fast forward, AMSRO has mentorship or speed mentorship sessions at the conference these days. And we get 50, 70, 100 people coming through just to learn more. So it's changed dramatically. So those are two simple things to do. There's ASMA as an organization. There's AMSRO. The University of Texas Medical Branch, or UTMB, has opportunities, again, not for OMS 1s, but for those who are a little bit later, the 3rd year, 4th year level. They have an Introduction to Aerospace Medicine course that's offered in the July timeframe of every year. Something you can look online and find and get more information on. We also have a clerkship that's offered on site at Johnson Space Center. That program, again, to put it in comparison, used to be twice a year, so 2 separate months through the year, so 2 different batches, 6 students each time. That has grown, and folks, correct me if I'm wrong, I think we get about 20 people now each time. The number of applications has gone up. The number of people interested has gone up. So that is a wonderful opportunity. And in the course of that 1 month, you will get to meet a lot of individuals from the astronaut corps, the medical community, the research community, life sciences, all talk. These are who's who in the field, and educate you on all different aspects of it. And so you'll get a good feel, hands-on, visiting a lot of parts of campus about what it is we do on the day-to-day basis. So those are some of the core opportunities that exist out there. We, due to some of the sensitive nature of what we do, at least as a medical director of the clinic, I can tell you that we are exposed to a lot of sensitive information. And so we do not have routine rotations for a random person to do a random elective in the clinic to shadow us. It's just not something we do. But if you are going through the official training program later in your career, then you will come through and get educated that way.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Thank you. Another question here from Tiana. Are physicians ever deployed into space, or are medical consultations, typically done via telemedicine?
That's a great question. I can let the guys talk to this one too, but one of the bad things about training flight surgeons that are coming up through UTMB and NASA is NASA will then pick a few. And almost every astronaut selection, there is almost always a physician or two in that astronaut class. And of course, if NASA gets to see and work with those physicians firsthand in Star City in Russia and at Johnson Space Center, and they get to know those folks firsthand, and those folks also have aerospace medicine training, well, those are the folks that they're going to go to first. And so very often, they always created a dilemma for me as the chief of space medicine at Johnson, is that they would pick off one or two of my flight surgeons, and then I'd have to go hire a couple more. So I was always in a hiring phase there. But that's also a good thing in that we have a fair amount of our astronauts that are physicians, and that we still work with all the time. I don't know, guys, anything else to add there?
I would just say that I think if many of us, if we were asked to do a home consult, basically on the International Space Station,
Sure.
we'd raise our hand, say, "Sign me up, let me go." But the truth is that all of our medical consultations are done remotely through telemedicine. Those that have been fortunate to be chosen as astronauts and happen to be doctors or NASA flight surgeons before they were selected, they have to go through the normal application process, just like 18,000 other people in the last selection cycle. So it's, I think a lot of us, we have that same dream, but we consider ourselves very lucky to be able to do what we do and to be able to practice medicine remotely to the space station.
Yeah, I differ in that I try to tell people who are flight surgeons not to drop their standards to become astronauts. You're a NASA flight surgeon, you are the top. So Chell Lindgren and Serena, who were our flight surgeon colleagues, got into the 2009 class. I'm like, guys, what the heck? You got the best job in the world. As far as the medical consultations, yeah, actually, Ben and his crew right now, once a week, they'll have a 15-minute private medical conference, a PMC, from one of our kind of private telemedicine rooms at NASA. And then if there's ever a reason to have an unscheduled or kind of a unexpected private time with the crew, they can do that too. And in addition to the private medical conferences, they'll have private psychological conferences with their psychologists once a month. They have private family conferences, usually once a week on the weekend. So they've got all kinds of IT live video streaming for the crew, which is huge for them, just to see their loved ones and see other folks. I'm not so sure they're excited about seeing their flight surgeons, but they get to see us every week anyway. I know when I was deployed multiple times, being able to use Skype to see my family back home after a couple of months of not seeing them was a huge morale booster. So I think that's why our behavioral health performance teams have set that up, and that works really well. The astronauts do have the ability to get a medical procedure kind of started, looking at their medical checklist, looking for procedures and stuff. But in low Earth orbit operations, they're going to do a medical consultation with their surgeon via telemedicine, and it's usually going to be kind of the way I described it. For Moon, for Mars missions, they're going to probably end up having to be a lot more autonomous, whether or not that's a surgeon who is actually flying that mission, or something else because they just won't have the luxury of having the almost continuous communications with Earth like we have right now on the ISS.
Perfect. So it wouldn't be 2020 to not ask kind of how COVID has impacted NASA this year, or your practice as physicians with the astronauts. And, I know that NASA's had a really big year this year and has a really big year planned for 2021. So maybe you can just speak to how it has or maybe hasn't impacted your work.
Oh boy, has it impacted our work. I don't think there's a day that I get off before 10 o'clock in the evening right now. It's literally today I was on with the White House and CDC on the vaccination plan and distribution plan. NASA is a great agency, whether you're buried in a Chilean mine or you're in the middle of a worldwide pandemic. Our agency always wants to bring something to the fore, and this is no different. We heard from clinicians in New York that these patients were hard to ventilate. Most ventilators only had 20 centimeters of PEEP, and they were needing to ventilate a lot of these patients at 30 because they were very stiff and non-compliant lungs. And so NASA went about inventing a light, lean, cheap ventilator that would go up to 30 centimeters of water and PEEP. And so and not only did they do that, but the Joint Propulsion Lab in NASA did it in something like 47 days and got it through the FDA. They've worked on O2 concentrators that would eliminate all those green bottles and literally suck oxygen out of the air, concentrate it, and give it to the patient on a scale that could supply an entire hospital. They've looked at and invented CPAP pressurized helmets and hoods. They've sterilization techniques using oxygen and different oxygen radicals to sterilize PPE and equipment. Despite the fact that it's a space agency, it has a lot of engineers that don't do well with sitting on the sidelines with a national crisis. And so NASA's responded a great deal to that. In addition, we've had to execute our normal missions, but do them in, I'd say, less than normal circumstances, putting the crews in quarantine. Ben's handled a lot of that for his missions, although we would normally put crews in quarantine before every mission, even before a pandemic, doing things like COVID testing and doing a lot of extra measures to protect the missions, because it's $1 billion impact. If mission control got infected and everybody had to sequester and isolate, that would be a massive impact. And so we've had to really put a lot of thought into a lot of our pandemic plans. But so far, I've been able to execute some pretty fascinating missions. Mars 2020 with the rover that will land in about 3 months on Mars. And the Mars Perseverance rover, by the way, has a single snake Asclepius plate attached to the front of it in honor of all the frontline healthcare workers that have worked the pandemic. It's the first time we've ever had anything like that on a spacecraft that will be on another planet. We just parallel parked to an asteroid, Bennu, 2 weeks ago, flying at something like 30,000 miles per hour, and reached out and took a sample of it. I can't even parallel park at Walmart very well, Aaron, and we parallel parked next to an asteroid traveling at an ungodly speed. And we've launched humans from American soil on commercial flights again for the first time in a long time. And the amount of work building those vehicles, flight surgeons don't just take care of the patients. We're actually involved in the human systems integration and human factors for those vehicles to make sure that they support the physiology for the crews. There's been a lot behind the scenes that we do and that the pandemic has certainly played an impact on. Guys, anything that I didn't cover in the 30,000 foot view there?
I'll just add that. I'll just add that with our launches and our landings for our missions with the astronauts, I just got done launching the latest SpaceX mission called Crew 1 from the Kennedy Space Center, and as part of our protection against getting the astronauts, making sure that they don't get infected with COVID, but also the hundreds of support staff that are there to make sure that we have a successful mission. We have something called the Health Stabilization Program, and that has taken another level from what we would normally do to try to ensure astronaut health prior to a rocket launch. We've took it up a notch to protect for to COVID-19. And that's been a big one that I've most recently been a part of. But as Dr. Polk mentioned, it's affected every facet of our jobs. And I think I'll turn it over to Dr. Scheuring, who's encountered the same thing with his astronauts, but on the other end, he's supported a recent landing into Russia and some of the challenges there.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. So the interesting thing with your question is when COVID hit in beginning middle of March, my team that was getting ready to retrieve our crew that had been on the space station 9 months, we didn't know the full scope of what was going on. So we were in our typical launch preparation or landing preparation mode, which is fairly intense with a lot of moving parts. And as the days went on, it was becoming more and more clear in mid-March, this was going to be a big deal. And we were going to have to start coming up with a plan, which didn't exist for us at the time, to figure out how to not only bring our crews back safely from space, but also to interact with multiple international teams who were all being affected by COVID in very different ways. I mean, the Russians were being affected one way, the Kyrgyzstans were being affected, or the Kazakhs were being affected another way, et cetera, et cetera. So very quickly, we had to kind of step away from just our normal landing medical preparations and all the logistics that go into retrieving a crew back from space to start looking at how we're going to, work with the restrictions each of these countries have with allowing, foreign travelers into their country and a variety of other factors. But the biggest concern for us was astronauts, by and large, are relatively immunocompromised. They have compromised T cell function for a variety of different reasons. So we had to really reach out to our infectious disease specialists, and one of our flight surgeons, we're very fortunate, is at the Mayo Clinic and really has access to cutting edge infectious disease work. And we had to get really smart really fast on developing a protocol, a plan on which we were going to do this, and then being able to execute it. And we had no precedent because NASA had never done this before. So things drastically changed how we did our normal operations. COVID testing wasn't really available like it is today. Treatments were, kind of empiric treatments, and all these other factors went into that, let alone all the moving parts associated with the landing operation. And in the end, just by God's grace, we were able to pull it all together, bring our immunocompromised crew back from space, bring them back to a quarantine in Houston, and stay there for 7 days until their T cell numbers started coming back up. And fortunately, no one got sick. No one on the team, no one on the crew got sick. We ended up publishing a paper that just came out in November in the Journal of Clinical Allergy and Immunology about what we did. And I think it was a really good story because going back to what JD said about how we respond very quickly to things and we get really smart people together to affect a plan and carry out a course of action, we had to do that. And I just did a return with the last crew member who came back in October is the what we call a direct return doc, and it was the same thing. It's very different. If you've seen one ISS launch or landing, you've seen one ISS launch or landing, and these were very different. And the things we know today in October are very different about COVID than what we learned in March and April, and trying to incorporate that and be smarter and safer and all these things that played into it, the quarantines we had to subject ourselves to before we left. And it dramatically affected our practice. But I think the encouraging thing for our teams is how well the teams work together, how quickly we were able to assimilate a very large number of resources to give us the best plan for the agency, and then ultimately bring the crew back safely. And NASA, I think it's one of the things NASA does best is take really hard problems and in very short order, because of the great people that work here, come up with plans that actually work. So I'm looking forward to it being over. I really like it when it used to be the way it was, but it's been a very interesting journey this past year.
I'd like to add one thing to this. I think all of my colleagues have they've touched on all the important points: launches, landing, all the other work, contributions made by NASA as an agency nationwide. Johnson Space Center is a very large campus. It's about roughly 9,000 to 10,000 people. And so in addition to launches and landings and day-to-day training of the crew, preventive measures, the response plan at a local, national, international level, I think it's important to say that all of us are fully tasked on a regular basis. We don't work at 75% on a given day, you know? And so from an administrative side, one of the things I've had an interest in over the years is taking a look at, for this COVID response, is going about hiring the extra help as soon as we could, and then trying to have a coordinated response for this large campus. And I feel what I do is a microcosm of what Dr. Polk does as a macro, right? Looking over all multiple centers while I focus on this one. But nonetheless, the intent is the same. I think as clinicians, we are on the hook for, and Dr. Polk and I have had a number of conversations, we are on the hook for understanding the medicine here. We certainly are. But we also have a responsibility to interface and communicate with non-clinical teammates on all of these impacts to operations and research. So that is just my little, in this little insert there of both the clinical side of what we do as well as the non-clinical side of what we do.
Fantastic. And I know we're coming to a close here. There's a million messages about how inspiring each of your journeys have been today. So I really can't thank you enough for the time you spent sharing a little bit about what you do today with us, and how being a DO specifically has really impacted and been an important part of your journeys. So with that, do you have any final words of wisdom you might share with the incoming class of 2025 as they embark on their journeys to become DOs and practicing physicians?
Well, I'll start and let the guys join in. But Aaron, first, thanks for inviting us. All four of us enjoy mentoring students and enjoy educating folks and seeing the next generation, exceed us and exceed our potential. I'll tell you, it's going to be hard to exceed these guys that are on the screen. They've had outstanding careers that have gone to great heights, but I have no doubt that folks will be able to do it. And hopefully the students see firsthand, you know leadership when you see it, but you also know competence when you see it and hear it. And the folks that I'm on with right now are highly competent physicians. And that I say highly competent physicians, not highly competent DOs. They're highly competent regardless whether they're DO or MD. And I think that's how we're judged, is by our competence. And then when we come in and we know what we're talking about, and we've done our homework and our research, and we've done great clinical due diligence for our patients, that competence shows. And that's the best way to carry forward the osteopathic flag, in my mind, is to be the most highly competent physicians that we can be. Yeah. Guys, anything else?
Yeah, I'll close by saying just thank you for this opportunity to share our experiences and answer questions. It always is something that we enjoy doing, to give back and put ourselves back in the shoes of each of you that are about to start medical school. My advice would be to pursue your passion, no matter what that passion is in medicine. Being a DO is not going to limit you in whatever your career aspirations are going to be. Each of us, we were able to share with you our passion for this small, tiny field called aerospace medicine that most people don't know about. It's that passion that drove us here, and then to be able to work for NASA and to do what we do. As you kind of get exposed to medicine, there is a million different pathways that you can embark on, and just make sure you're enjoying what you're passionate about.
Nothing to add.
I will simply say that I don't feel like I go to work. I work very hard, but I feel privileged. It is an honor I do not take my position for granted. It is an honor to serve our agency, to serve our country in this fashion, to have a position that allows me to mesh together my personal interest for spaceflight with my professional interest as a physician. And I love going to work every day. No 2 days are the same. And when I have residents in training with me, I invite them to my office and we sit down. Every day is different. Every problem, every challenge, everything is unique. But because, as Dr. Johansen said, we pursued a passion, it doesn't feel like work. It just feels like you get to be part of a great team effort.
Awesome. Well, I feel the same way about teaching our future osteopathic physicians more about the profession. So thank you for being amazing role models for all of them and for future physicians, both MD and DO alike. And best of luck with the rest of your missions in 2020 and 2021. And thank you, just truly from the bottom of my heart and from our entire community. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Aaron, and thanks for representing the NASA colors today.
Yeah. Great shirt. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Take care.